I can hear them, right now, pacing above me, dragging furniture, dropping something heavy that rattles through the ceiling. I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, trying to convince myself it's nothing, but I can't. Because no one has lived upstairs for years. Not a single person. The apartment has been empty, sealed, and silent. Yet here they are, moving with deliberate, intimate steps that pipes and settling boards could never mimic. If you've ever lived in shared housing, you know the difference. You know the way a footfall carries weight, the way a chair scrapes across linoleum in a rhythm only a living being could produce. The creaks and hums of a building settling don't hesitate. They don't pause to let you catch your breath, then start again, like someone is testing whether you're awake. The sounds up there are precise, intentional, aware. And I can't escape the feeling that they know I'm listening. I confess to you now because I don't know what else to do. I can't tell anyone. Friends would think I'm imagining it. Neighbors have moved, and the landlord never comes up this far. So I talk to you. Maybe you'll understand, because anyone who's spent a night in a silent building knows that silence has shape. And when that shape is broken, when the rhythm shifts just right, it can be the most terrifying sound in the world. Right now, I'm counting the seconds between steps. Footstep, footstep, drag, thump. A pause, then a deliberate shuffle, the scraping of what must be furniture, heavy and careful. It's almost respectful, in a way, acknowledging my presence without fear. But respect doesn't make it less wrong. I try to pull my blanket tighter around myself, listen to my own breathing, and remind myself of something that feels impossible. This apartment, this building, this floor above me, it used to be normal. It used to be quiet. It used to feel safe. And now, someone is still walking up there. The building I live in is the kind you forget the moment you walk out the door. Brick facade, peeling paint, and a stairwell that smells like wet carpet and old coffee. The rent is cheap, which is to say, I pay for predictability and nothing more. My apartment is small, a single bedroom with a kitchenette and a bathroom whose tiles have seen better decades. There's nothing remarkable about it. Everything is ordinary, and that's exactly why I chose it. Ordinary means safe, or so I told myself. Days bleed into each other here. I wake, make coffee, scroll through my phone, go to work, come back, heat something in the microwave, watch some mindless show, and sleep. The walls are thin, so thin I can hear my neighbors cough, flush toilets, argue over the phone. I laugh to myself about it, because what else is there to do when a radiator rattles at 2 a.m. or the pipes groan like they're having an argument of their own? Landlords are absent by design, probably convinced that if you pay your rent, they can afford to ignore you entirely. And that's fine. I can live with a little neglect. I can live with cheap rent and predictable isolation. The upstairs unit has been vacant for years. Officially, at least. Notices taped to the door, rent checks stopped, and keys surrendered. I checked once, long ago, convinced that someone must have moved in and that the building records were wrong. Nothing. Just dust on the floorboards, the faint smell of stale air, and the quiet assurance that no one should be walking above me. I used to read stories like this online, the kind with anonymous narrators describing creaks, whispers, footsteps in empty spaces. I would scroll past, scoffing, sure that rational explanations existed for every sound. Pipes, animals, imagination. All perfectly logical, perfectly safe. And yet, here I am, lying in the dark, realizing that empty doesn't mean harmless. Over time, the noises upstairs started to form a pattern. Footsteps at roughly the same times each night, a drag of something heavy along the floorboards, a soft thud followed by a pause that lasted just long enough to make me hold my breath. Even the scraping of chairs seemed intentional, precise, almost rehearsed. I began to notice when the pacing changed, when the rhythm stuttered or stretched. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, as if the person, or whatever it was, upstairs was testing me, pacing in response to my awareness. The quiet building I had praised for its predictability now felt like it was hiding its own set of rules. I laughed to myself, dryly, because what choice did I have? This was the life I rented. Thin walls, absentee landlords, neighbors who never noticed, and a supposedly vacant apartment directly above me that seemed anything but empty. And as I lay there, counting the beats of footsteps and the creaks of wood, I realized with a sinking feeling that someone, or something, had been following patterns I didn't yet understand. Patterns that were beginning to follow me. At first, I tried to ignore it. Footsteps above, the occasional thud, a chair scraping against the floorboards. Just the building settling, I told myself. But patterns emerged. I began keeping a mental log, then a physical one, jotting down times and sequences in the dead of night. 10 steps at 11:03, pause, a heavy drop at 11:07, the scraping of a chair at 11:12. Night after night, almost exactly the same. It was too precise to be random. I started timing the moments when the pacing would stop. The footsteps above my bedroom, directly overhead, would freeze in place, as if someone was listening, waiting. I tried holding my breath, just to test the theory, and the sound would cease entirely, leaving only a faint hum of silence. Exhale, and the rhythm would resume. It was subtle, almost playful, but deliberate. Someone, or something, was aware of me, observing me, responding. Rational explanations began to fail. Pipes don't pause when you hold your breath. Rats don't drag furniture across floorboards in perfect intervals. And yet, I told myself there had to be an answer. Old buildings have quirks. Drafts make things rattle. I could measure vibrations, test acoustics, and maybe, just maybe, it was all explainable. The data was compelling, but my confidence and logic was slipping, inch by inch, as each night reinforced the pattern. I spoke to neighbors, casually at first, as if the sound were mundane. "You hear things from time to time?" I asked. They shrugged, smiles polite, eyes distant. "Nothing unusual," they said. Even the landlord, the absentee type who only appeared when rent checks bounced, dismissed my concerns. "No one lives up there. Hasn't for years." The official record matched my memory, and yet the footsteps continued, the thuds and scrapes obeying a meticulous schedule. One night stands out. I held my breath longer than usual, almost daring it to continue. Silence. Not just absence of sound, but a heavy, expectant quiet, as if the building itself were waiting for me to break first. My chest ached, my ears rang with the emptiness, and I realized I had never been this aware of a space before. Not my room, not the ceiling above, not the thin walls separating me from the rest of the building. Every creak, every drop, every shuffle carried intelligence. I began recording, documenting every sound, every pause, every variation. Patterns became clearer, steps pacing back and forth, objects dropped at intervals, even the subtle scraping that preceded heavier thuds. And the more I documented, the more I realized this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random echo of the building settling. This apartment above, vacant on paper, forgotten by the city, had its own schedule, its own rules, its own awareness. Eventually, curiosity overcame hesitation. I contacted the landlord again, pressing for details. Dates, previous tenants, repairs, anything. That's when I learned the official truth. The apartment above hadn't been vacant for as long as I thought. The records were incomplete, the previous tenant untraceable. And though the building's paperwork suggested emptiness, the reality, the one I could hear every night, told a different story entirely. I called the landlord again, insisting I needed answers. "The apartment above me," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "It isn't empty. I hear someone walking, moving things. Furniture. Heavy steps. It's—" He interrupted, clipped and dismissive. "That unit's been sealed for years. No one has lived up there since before I took over management. Don't know what you're imagining." "Sealed?" I repeated, trying to mask my disbelief. "There's a door, right? A hallway?" "I've seen it." "Hallway? Door?" he asked, as if confused. "You must be mistaken. That section of the floor isn't accessible. We've removed the stairwell access and sealed the unit for safety reasons. It's been unoccupied for years. That's the record." I dug deeper, asking for floor plans, maintenance logs, anything that could clarify the layout. What I received made my blood run cold. The diagrams didn't match reality. The apartment's shape, its dimensions, the hallway outside my door, all of it contradicted what I had memorized over years of living there. Walls were missing, doors shifted. The unit above simply wasn't where it should be according to any official document. I pressed him further. "Are you sure no one lived there recently? Any tenant at all?" "There's no record," he said firmly. "Not since the previous owner left. Everything has been sealed." "I assure you, you're mistaken." I wanted to argue, to point out the sounds, the footsteps, the scrapes and thuds that had haunted me for weeks. But my words faltered when I tried to reconcile them with the paperwork. Every memory I had of the building, the layout, the previous tenants, even the noises that had once seemed ordinary, clashed with the official story. Determined, I tried accessing the stairwell. I expected the familiar route, a metal door, a flight of stairs leading up. But the door was gone, replaced with a solid wall. I tested it, pushed, rapped, even pulled at what little frame remained. Nothing. The corridor ended abruptly, as if it had never existed. The route to the upstairs apartment, the space I had been hearing every night, was physically inaccessible. I called neighbors, asking questions as casually as possible. None of them recalled a tenant moving in, and several insisted the unit had been empty for years. Their certainty was unnerving, a shared memory of absence that didn't match my own. I had lived with these sounds for weeks. How could they be all imagining it? Or worse, how could I be imagining it alone? I went back to my apartment, pacing, replaying every sound I had logged. Footsteps, drops, scrapes, pauses, all precise, all deliberate. My own memories were consistent, but everything else, the records, the blueprints, the stairwell itself, had been erased, altered. Something had deliberately removed traces of this apartment from the building, from official history, from anyone's knowledge but mine. The implications hit me in waves. If it could erase the layout, the records, the existence of a tenant, then what else could it manipulate? What else had been rewritten that I hadn't noticed? The uncertainty clawed at me, a gnawing fear beneath the surface of my rational mind. This wasn't just a vacant unit. This was a void, a space that defied documentation, observation, even belief. That night, the sounds escalated. Footsteps multiplied, as if more than one presence occupied the void above. Thuds landed with heavier weight, dragging and scraping, echoing more sharply than ever before. Pauses became pregnant, drawn-out moments that left me holding my breath, heart hammering, afraid to move. The noises seemed to respond directly to my investigation, reacting to my intrusion into the truth. I realized that seeking answers had only intensified the activity. The apartment may have been sealed on paper, erased from memory and design, but it was very much alive in reality. Every attempt to pin it down, to reconcile the official story with the experience, had provoked it. The floor above me was no longer just a mystery. It was active, aware, and deliberate. And as I lay awake, Notebook open, pen poised, listening to the steps pacing overhead. I understood that erasure didn't mean absence. The apartment was gone from the world, but it existed perfectly in the space where I could hear it, moving, calculating, waiting. The building was silent elsewhere, but above me, something was undeniably awake. I asked my first question aloud, voice shaking more than I expected. "Are you real?" The response was immediate. Footsteps began pacing directly above me, perfectly in sync with my movements. I shifted on the bed, and so did they. I stood up, and the floorboards creaked in a mirrored rhythm, as if someone, or something, was shadowing my every motion. My rational mind fought to explain it. Building settling, I whispered to myself. Pipes, drafts, echoing, anything. But deep down I knew. Nothing in this building moved like that on its own. The next sound came with a chill, a scratching directly above my bed. Slow, deliberate, circling the points where my head and shoulders rested. I froze, heart hammering. It wasn't random. It was aware of me. It was interacting. The thin walls I had once joked about, laughed off, suddenly felt like they had teeth. I tried dark humor, whispering, "Oh, great. I'm on your radar now. Hope you like my new duvet." My laughter sounded hollow even to me. Humor was no shield here. It only highlighted how exposed I was. Every step, every scrape, every pause seemed calibrated to my presence. I noticed subtle patterns. A thump when I exhaled, a shuffle when I reached for my notebook, a prolonged silence when I held still. It was learning, adapting, mimicking, testing. The intelligence behind it was terrifying in its simplicity. I had thought it was random, that ignoring it might make it go away. I was wrong. Curiosity had drawn a spotlight onto me, and the activity above was responding. I tried to speak to it again, half joking, half terrified. "You really enjoy this, don't you?" A long, deliberate drag of something heavy answered. My bedframe creaked. The air pressed down in familiar rhythm with the steps. It was deliberate. It was deliberate in a way that made me understand the warning I should have seen coming. Asking questions didn't make it stop. It made it aware that I was listening, that I was participating. To anyone reading this, pay attention. Really pay attention. If you've ever felt the faintest echo above you, the whisper of movement in an empty apartment, the drag of an object when no one should be there, consider this your warning. Curiosity is not innocent. Reading further, observing patterns, noticing anomalies, they're invitations. They tell whatever is listening that you exist, that you've crossed the line. And once you've done that, you're part of the rhythm. The sounds became harder to ignore. Scraping, dragging, pacing, thumps that matched my heartbeat. Every move I made was mirrored, every hesitation cataloged. I tried closing my eyes, trying to retreat inward, but the noises persisted, a relentless answer to my presence. It wasn't playful. It wasn't malicious. It was deliberate, patient, aware, and terrifyingly intelligent. Finally, I made a decision. If it was going to respond, then I needed proof. I needed something tangible to track this, to measure it, to document the impossible. I grabbed my phone, set up voice recording, positioned the camera across the room, and started logging every sound, every mirrored movement, every pause. I had to record it before I lost track entirely. Because once curiosity had been noticed, the activity above me would never stop. And if I didn't document it, no one would ever believe it, even me. I played back the first recording the next morning, expecting static, creaks, maybe my own imagination captured imperfectly by the phone. What I heard instead made me freeze. Footsteps pacing, chairs scraping, the soft thump of something heavy. But underneath it all, a voice I had never heard live. Low, deliberate, whispering my name. "Ethan." I sat up, heart hammering, Rewound, played it again. Same thing, clear as daylight. Not a distortion, not an echo. The name came at precise intervals, almost casual, almost conversational, but unmistakably directed at me. My rational brain sputtered, trying to form explanations. Could it be a neighbor? A prank? Acoustics playing tricks? But the tone, the rhythm, the precision, it was impossible. Someone, or something, was aware of me in a way I couldn't ignore. The second recording confirmed it, even more pronounced. Whispers not audible while awake. Words and languages I didn't understand, some just static syllables, but each punctuated by my name. It was as if the space itself spoke only when I wasn't fully conscious, revealing details I wasn't meant to know. My apartment, my building, everything I trusted as normal, had become a conduit for messages I couldn't have imagined. I turned to research. Old forums, discussion threads on urban exploration and abandoned units, police reports tucked into dusty digital archives. Accounts eerily similar. Tenants hearing footsteps above empty apartments. Objects moving without explanation. Doors opening when they were locked. Some stories ended with relocation. Some with evacuation. Others with disappearances. Patterns emerged. Recognition, mimicry, precise responses, and, always, the building records claiming absence. The stories spanned years, cities, even continents, but the behavior was consistent. The realization hit me like a punch. Documenting this, even just recording it, was part of the interaction. Every time I captured the footsteps, every time I logged the sounds, I was confirming my presence, drawing attention. The act of observation itself had consequences. Safety was an illusion. Proof was a signal. By seeking evidence, I had stepped fully into the rhythm of whatever existed upstairs. I felt exposed, cataloged by a presence I could neither see nor confront openly. Even the hums, subtle vibrations I had dismissed as structural quirks, were now menacing in their clarity. The recordings didn't just validate the impossible, they marked me. The more I listened, the more deliberate the responses became. Scraping matched my movements in playback, thumps coincided with my own breathing, and the whispers, the whispers, reminded me constantly that I was being tracked, known, named. A dark thought crept in. Perhaps the forum posts, the old reports, were warnings disguised as stories. Evidence of what happened to those who tried to understand, to document, to assert control over what should have remained unseen. The space above, the empty apartment, was not passive. It measured attention, it cataloged recognition, and it responded accordingly. I realized the next step was inevitable. Recording, observing, researching, it wasn't enough. The space needed confrontation. Not for proof, not for understanding, but because avoidance had become a liability. The patterns were too precise, the responses too deliberate. If I stayed silent, the mimicry, the whispers, the thumps would continue escalating until I had no choice but to act. I collected the equipment, phone, camera, audio recorder. Every tool I had used to document was now my lifeline and my tether. And as the footsteps resumed overhead with that familiar pacing, the faint scrape of a chair brushing across the floorboards, I understood that I could no longer hide behind evidence. I had to step into the space directly, or risk becoming just another story in someone else's archive. It was time to confront the apartment above. I woke to the sound of cracking. Not the subtle settling of an old building, not the predictable groan of pipes, but a deep, uneven fracture that ran across the ceiling above my bed. The plaster had split in a jagged line, dust falling like snow onto my sheets. I froze, heart hammering, staring at the slowly widening crack. Something had pressed against it. Something had been above me, and now the space was no longer entirely separate. I traced the edges with trembling fingers. Tiny footprints, impressions too small for a person but too deliberate for debris, marred the plaster. The dust had been shifted in a pattern that suggested weight, movement, intent. Every mark carried the unmistakable signature of presence, organized, deliberate, aware. I felt it in my bones. The apartment above had already begun to invade my space. And then I heard it, breathing. Slow, deliberate, wet and rasping. Directly overhead, not muffled by walls, not echoing through pipes. Each inhale was heavy, deliberate, as though the entity occupying the empty unit was aware of me lying below, recording, observing, resisting. I held my breath, and the sound hesitated for a fraction of a second, then continued, deliberate, patient, teasing the limits of my awareness. I spoke aloud, voice shaking despite myself. "Who's there?" The response was muffled, but distinct, a whisper, impossibly clear, threaded through the structural vibrations above me. "I'm here," it said, not a voice from a neighbor, not a hallucination. It was a reply, directed, intentional, informed by my inquiry. My chest tightened. The dialogue was no longer one-sided. I could not rationalize it. I could not ignore it. I staggered to the window, hands gripping the sill, trying to anchor myself in the reality I thought I knew. The room above me, my apartment, the building, had become something else entirely. It wasn't simply vacant. It wasn't a hidden tenant. It was a presence operating in ways my mind could barely comprehend, occupying space that shouldn't exist, bending dimensions, shifting the rules of walls and ceilings. Every structural element I had trusted, the floorboards, the plaster, the ceiling joists, had been violated, rewritten, and now carried its mark. Footsteps returned, heavier this time, paired with the scratching and dragging I had logged for weeks. They moved above me, circling, pacing, as though probing the exact boundaries of my bed, my desk, my floor. And then came the dialogue, low and deliberate, layered with a strange echo. "You hear me. You know I'm here." I wanted to run. I wanted to retreat to a corner, pull the blanket over my head, shut out the sound, shut out the presence. But there was no corner safe enough, no retreat that could separate me from the knowledge now pressing down. The ceiling had collapsed, figuratively if not entirely physically, between my world and the space above. I was aware now of a truth I had avoided. The apartment above me wasn't empty, not in any sense of the word. Occupancy had evolved beyond human definition. It was alive, aware, responding to observation, interacting with weight, sound, and now, words. I tried speaking again, careful this time. "What do you want?" The reply was almost casual, almost conversational. To be known, to be observed, to continue. Each syllable vibrated through the plaster, resonating in my skull. The air itself seemed to carry meaning, pushing and pulling against me, bending with intent. I realized, with grim clarity, that my attempts to rationalize, to record, to observe, it had all drawn attention. Observation was no longer a shield. It was a beacon, and then I understood the ceiling's true message. This was no longer an upstairs apartment. It was a threshold. It had been patient for years, waiting for recognition, for interaction, for acknowledgement that someone below could perceive it. The cracks, the dust, the footprints, the breathing, they were all invitations, and I had accepted without realizing it. The boundaries between floors, walls, and presence were gone. There was no above anymore, only this shared, conscious space pressing down into my life. Panic hit, sharp and immediate, but it didn't last long. Fear, I realized, was irrelevant now. The moment I knew, The point at which I could no longer deny it had passed. Resistance was futile. Rationality was insufficient. The entity, or whatever inhabited the space above, was aware, active, and patient. Every sound, every movement, every whisper carried intelligence. I sank back onto the bed, shivering, listening to the rhythmic scraping and thumping overhead, to the steady, deliberate breathing that no wall could contain. The presence wasn't trying to harm. Not yet. It was demonstrating boundaries, cataloging awareness, marking territory, confirming observation. And I was at the center of it, fully exposed. The line had been crossed. There was no retreat, no denial, no return to normalcy. The upstairs unit had come down, metaphorically if not entirely physically, and in that moment, I understood the point of no return. Every creak, every drag, every breath that vibrated through the ceiling was proof. My world and the space above had merged, and I could never unhear, unsee, or unknow what had been revealed. And as the footsteps circled overhead, the dust swirling, the breathing steady and deliberate, I realized I had stepped into a reality that no longer obeyed walls, ceilings, or human rules. I was part of it now. I found the first clue in the municipal archives. Old eviction notices, building permits, and police reports, records that didn't match the timeline of the tenants I had heard about. Names listed as moved out, relocated, or unknown destination. But each one was accompanied by vague annotations. Unit checked, nothing found. Building intact, no evidence of occupancy. The language was sterile, bureaucratic, indifferent. And it hit me like a blow. The tenants weren't missing. They had never left. The upstairs space doesn't just exist as an apartment. It absorbs people, not physically in the conventional sense, but in a way that bends perception, memory, and reality. Residents enter, and the building folds them into the void, cataloging presence, erasing official traces, shifting dimensions until the world itself forgets they ever existed. Papers mark absence, but the air, the floorboards, the walls remember. I had read reports and forum posts before, dismissed them as urban legend, but now the pattern was undeniable. Every sound I documented, every whisper, every footstep, wasn't random. It was the imprint of those absorbed, a residue of previous occupants layered over the present. The building, once innocuous, is a trap disguised as architecture. Floors, ceilings, corridors, they all act as camouflage. The authorities, the landlords, the city, they all participate in the deception, consciously or unconsciously. No one looks for the missing because the system itself ensures there's nothing to find. I realized, with a sinking certainty, that escape is uncertain. You can't simply walk out a door or call for help. The absorption isn't instantaneous, but it is relentless. Observation draws attention. Interaction marks you. Each sound you notice, every movement you log, every question you ask. These are invitations, signs that the building has cataloged you as present, aware, and therefore at risk. Silence is the only protective measure. Not for long-term safety, not for certainty, but enough to buy time. The act of noticing cannot be undone, but restraint can delay the full extent of absorption. I tried it for hours, moving as little as possible, speaking only when necessary, holding my breath when I felt the shift in the floor above me. The steps paused, the scraping softened, but the presence remained, patient and waiting, like a tide I could only hope wouldn't rise while I slept. Acceptance followed fear. I could no longer fight the truth. My home, the apartment I had once considered safe, was now a container. The upstairs unit, the void that had mirrored my curiosity, was not a space to explore, but a system to respect. Survival depended on understanding the rules without violating them, on walking quietly, on breathing lightly, on maintaining the illusion that I was still just part of ordinary routine. I thought about the tenants before me. I thought about the footsteps, the whispers, the furniture moving above my head. They were not gone. They had become part of the building, their presence folded into a rhythm of observation, memory, and control. And now, I was cataloged the same way. Their fate was a warning, and resignation was my only defense. Terror had no power once understanding replaced it. Acceptance offered a fragile, temporary shelter. And so, I exist in this building as both witness and participant, aware of what the upstairs space does, cautious in my movements, careful in my breathing. I write this as a confession, a record, a final note. Understanding does not undo what has happened. It only allows you to live long enough to realize you are next. The missing tenants were never missing. They were absorbed, folded into a system beyond comprehension. And now, I am cataloged alongside them, navigating the silence that may yet preserve me. Here's what I've learned. Too late for myself, but in time for anyone listening. The rules are simple and cruel. Observe without acknowledgement, move without drawing attention, breathe without pause, and above all, don't assume empty means harmless. Silence is the only shield, and even silence is fragile. Curiosity invites presence, recognition guarantees interaction, and awareness marks you for absorption. Most people never notice. Most people live in buildings without thinking about what's above them, assuming floor plans are absolute, that walls contain reality. They're wrong. The top floor, the space at the edge of your perception, the apartment or unit that seems vacant or abandoned, those are not mistakes. They're deliberate, patient, and waiting. They measure you in steps, in breaths, in pauses you don't even realize you take. And when they know you're aware, it begins. I tried to rationalize, to document, to prove, to escape. Every step brought the presence closer, every sound, every record, every question fed it, marking me. And now I live in quiet, careful, cataloged. I have no illusions about safety. The building is not neutral. It does not forgive. It does not forget. So consider this your warning. Do not live on the top floor. Do not peer too closely at cracks or ceilings. Do not count footsteps or whisper your own name aloud. Awareness is not protection, it is invitation. And as you sit there, reading this, take a moment and glance upward. Because whatever is above you right now is already aware that you are listening.